Edition of Real Talk on the I Love Seville Network. Albemarle County Supervisor Ned Galloway,
Chairman,
via Skype, and City Councilor Lloyd Snook in person on a glorious day to be alive. Keith Smith.
It is, and I thank the two gentlemen. I know they've got super busy schedules, but what we're going to do is we're going to catch up with Ned, all things Albemarle County, and I want to chat a little bit about his thoughts from last night's affordable housing community engagement kickoff that UVA did, and we're gonna chat a little bit about that. So I'm looking forward to it. So Ned, apologize for running a little bit late, but we'll get you here in a minute.
You'll start the show when you're ready, guys. Give it a like and a share. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Spotify, TikTok, YouTube, iloveseville.com, every social platform possible.
And my favorite?
What's your favorite?
Periscope.
Oh, Periscope! I knew it was Periscope. J-Dubs, my friend, we can rock and roll with you.
I have no idea what that is, but it just sounds cool.
It's the video streaming component of Twitter.
Say, look at that.
Yeah.
So,
Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk, an insider's guide to real estate, life, and the pursuit of happiness, presented by the Yes Team Realtors and Interstate Pest and Service Companies. We are live in Charlottesville, across Albemarle County, Central Virginia, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love Seville Network. Fridays, one of my favorite days of the week. This show, one of my favorite shows on the network. Judah Wickhauer is the director. If we could go to the studio camera and welcome my friend, Keith Smith, to the program.
Good morning, Jerry. I was just noticing, that's a new jacket. I don't think I've seen that before.
Thank you very much.
I like it.
I appreciate
Where'd you get that?
I got this at Brooks Brothers.
There you go.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to Brooks Brothers next.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. This is an exciting show. As you know, we've been, the whole month of May, we've been doing these affordable housing roundtables on Friday. So we've got two awesome guests coming up. We've got Ned Galloway, the chairman of Albemarle County Board of Supervisors. We're going to catch up on him a little bit via Skype because he's doing this thing called Work in Richmond.
Right.
And I tried my best to get him to come live. I even enticed him with, hey, maybe we can treat you to a martini or something.
And then he said, Keith, it's 10:15 in the morning.
I think that's okay. but yeah, so he's out working hard, so he's going to Skype in here in a few minutes, so we're going to catch up on that. And I want to talk to Ned about this affordable housing community engagement kickoff event that went off last night and kind of get it from, the two guests we have. The second one coming up is Lloyd Snook, City Councilor. And I just thought it'd be really good to kind of bow tie this at the end and get the elected officials' opinion on that event. So let's see how it goes.
So Lloyd Snook on the back portion of today's program. Judah Wickhauer, we have Ned Galloway on the line, the chairman, Albemarle County Board of Supervisors. Ned, you are live across every social platform possible. First, good morning. Happy Friday to you.
Good morning. Every platform possible? I don't even know what that means.
Any social media platform that exists, your interview and this conversation, this is streaming upon.
To include awesome. Periscope, which is my favorite.
Yeah, Keith Smith's favorite is Periscope. Now, if you asked him what is Periscope, I don't think he could tell you what Periscope is.
I would not tell you, but it just sounds cool.
But he loves Periscope. All right, first, why don't we start with an open-ended question. How's everything going with you, your life, and then we'll talk shop.
Yeah, everything's good. It's a beautiful day out. We're going to have 90 degrees on Tuesday or something crazy like that. So things are good.
Oh, you can keep that on. Do a little selfless promotion. Keep the Carl Lotz.
Oh, did you see me sneak my name tag off?
Carl Lotz thing on. Ned, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you, sir?
If I was doing any better, it'd be illegal. I'm sitting here on a Friday. I got two good friends looking across the table at me, and we're going to talk real estate and all things Albemarle County. So life is good, man. It doesn't get much better than that.
Awesome.
Before we get into last night's event, if you don't mind, high level, just give us a little look at this. You got a Carl Lotz mug. I mean, you're marketing the heck out of this thing. Well played, sir. Well played. So give us an update. How's things going in Albemarle County? I know you guys are wrapped up your budget or just about, and anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, we had our public hearing last night, or 2 nights ago, I'm sorry. So we're closing in on getting the, we'll take the formal action in the upcoming meeting. But all the supervisors had public hearings or town hall meetings virtually out there to hear from people. Good questions. I think we've got them answered, and it'll be nice to get this budget behind us. Staff has done a great job, and last year they really got pitched a curve with the pandemic and everything they had to go through. So this year, still taking a cautious approach, not getting overly done, but working hard to understand the money's coming down from the feds. But then just making sure that we've still got reserves and cushion in place that if something goes sideways on us as we work through this, we'll be ready for it. So just throwing out a great job to our team led by our county executive, Jeff Richardson, and everybody on his staff all the way through.
Yeah, you guys are very fortunate. You've got some rock stars over there. You made an announcement a week or so ago.
Yes, he did.
You want to kind of do that
Yeah,
again?
so I'm officially out of the gate, I guess, running for re-election for my second term. So I'm excited about that. I was very fortunate that folks had me serve the last I guess it's not even quite 3.5 years, but there are still things and priorities that I would like to work on, and being able to, I enjoy doing the constituent service. I enjoy working on the things that we work on, and see some other things through. And I think another term at least is going to be needed to do that.
So I can speak from a personal perspective. Ned and I sit on a couple of committees together, a couple of boards together, and I every time I have him in a meeting or he's in a meeting, I walk out generally a little bit smarter. He always contributes. So
Kind words.
yeah. He's watching. I'm sorry.
He is.
But yeah, I mean, guys, you can't act for a person to represent you. How does the campaign go so far?
Well, I mean, we just got the announcement done and out. It's a little early. I've always in the past tried to announce in March, so I got it was difficult this year to make that happen. So announced early in April, but we have to get budget done, and once that's done and that lift is over, things start to ramp up over the summer, and then do a lot of your outreach. I'm hoping that by the fall, it'll be curious to see where we're at. Right, the idea of 6 months ago, the idea of campaigning during a pandemic was very different than what we've been used to in the past. So, collecting signatures and stuff this year was a whole different ball game, because it's like, well, you don't really just want to pop up on somebody's doorstep unannounced with the way things are. So, at some point, I think we'll get back to some normalcy, but you still have to be mindful of that. You can't just assume that you can knock on somebody's door unannounced, and you don't want to worry them that you're showing up. So, but I'm looking forward to the social aspect of it, because that's been missing for all of us in many ways the last 13, 14 months.
Yeah, we're social creatures by nature, and getting out there, particularly, what you're doing, as an elected official, it's great, these Zooms and these Skypes and all this kind of great stuff, but to actually get to see somebody in face and have that conversation and watch their body language, and it is immeasurable on that.
What are we waiting on the governor for that?
I think we're waiting on the governor for that.
Is that right?
Well, he announced, what was it yesterday, or the outdoors, like sporting events and some different changes to align with the CDC. I think he upped his game plan, or upped his timeline, not game plan, for outside sporting events, things like that. So, the outdoor part of it, I think, will be fine. So I think one person hitting a door, but, we'll just have to be mindful. I'll be curious when I talk to people how they feel about it, just to make sure that, if I know a family has young children or people under a certain age that haven't been vaccinated yet, that, if you're going to go knock on that door, that'll be a different approach than if I know I've got 2 fully vaccinated people that are, maybe retirees that don't have folks that might not be vaccinated in the house. It's just like everything else the last 14, 15 months. We just have to put a couple extra layers of consideration into this before we just go out and do things like we used to.
Are we going to keep the virtual meetings once we can get back to meeting in person again? Because it seems engagement numbers are at all-time highs for some of these meetings,
Sure.
the government meetings.
You're talking about the public meetings.
Yeah, the public meetings. Are we going to include the virtual element, Ned, moving forward?
I mean, I think it's not an easy thing to just say yes or no, right? Because the state is going to have to weigh in on this. You know, the only reason we're able to meet virtually is because we're under this emergency ordinance, as we all know, because we have to announce that at the beginning. The ordinance that all public bodies are announcing in order to meet virtually. The sentiment, I can tell you, because it's been publicly stated by the Albemarle County supervisors, is that they hope some version of the virtual will continue. I think all of us want to be back at the DAS meeting in person. So I don't think it's necessarily that supervisors want to be virtually meeting, but we're hoping that participation by others can continue to happen virtually. It's just, we did a ribbon cutting a few days ago for our mobile van that goes out and does services, which it's been in play, delivering masks and stuff like that during the pandemic. But we were delivering books to the little libraries in the parks. And I had said then, Zoom has allowed us to go to where the people are to allow them to participate, much the same way that van is designed to go out and take services to people. So I'm hoping some version of this virtual participation will be allowed, but the General Assembly will have to put it into their rules and guidelines, which governs how public bodies meet.
Again, this goes back to this whole Dillon rule, state, right? So the state is the one that has to do that. The only, as Ned said, the only reason we can do this is because the governor's declared the emergency. But I suspect there's going to be some hybrid developed over time. So let's talk about last night a little bit. Did you get an opportunity to watch it?
I did. I tuned in a little bit late, so I didn't get the beginning of it, but I was there for the bulk of it. I certainly got to hear the question answers and the polling that they did, which I thought was a great idea towards the end. So that was I appreciated seeing that.
So I took a stab this morning and created 3 slides out of the polling because I thought that was the real crux of it, and it was pretty interesting. The first slide was what aspect of affordable housing is most important to you, and what they did is they ranked them, right? So the level of affordability was up at 86%, and location, which I found super interesting, that kind of both the level of affordability and location was up there in the 80s. The scale of the building, which was the third question, was kind of around in the 30s, right, around 33%, which I guess as a recovering developer and builder and somebody in the space, I actually kind of thought that number was going to get a little higher than what
Why
it.
so?
Well, it just seems in rezonings and meetings like that, scale always seems to be super important. I think location and level of affordability to me was kind of, okay, I get it. That makes sense. Inherent into the conversation. But scale down at that level was a little surprising to me. I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that, Ned.
Well, I mean, I think location's an interesting when you start discussing it further, right? We might think of a like we'll take one that was I don't know if it was controversial, but it was definitely had a lot of public input, the Parkway Place right out there by K-Tech. And that's one where a lot of arguments were made where density should be. But part of my concern was the infrastructure. Like if you put a huge apartment complex out there and we don't, CAT only runs a bus through there once an hour, right? So it's a great location from a standpoint of close to the city center. It's in the urban area. It's where the density should be. But when you start thinking of, even though it's in a great location, not all the things that people who live in that density want to have around them doesn't necessarily exist yet. So we just have to be mindful that, okay, great, there are great locations geographically, but what's around them to support the population once they're put in there, that has to be taken into consideration. And I think that's what we look at when we're considering these applications as they come in front of us.
So that was kind of interesting. So that went into question number 2, which is what is the most desirable amenity for affordable housing development? And I'll buzz through it real quickly. Community center was 27%, community service was 24%, green space 20%, continuing ed or kindergarten to 12, education support 15%, and job training 15 on ed. But those numbers were very close.
That's an even spread.
Right? But the funny thing was, what was not on that amenity list? To me, I think it's an amenity. Transportation. That was not
Yeah.
in that question pool.
I think people it's a given. They think just if it's in the urban ring and it's in the growth area, that it's going to have the services that are required to, that those folks living there would have. And frankly, in the urban, they're not necessarily there. If you live just on the near Stonehenge, or not Stonehenge, down where Trader Joe's, the name just jumped out of there. Stonefield, couldn't think of the second part of the name. But if you live over in that area and you work on Pantops, public transit can't get you there in a reasonable way. So then it puts more of a demand on being vehicular. Now, if you were just thinking about it and you're like, oh, well, that's a great place to have density or to have apartments or to live in, you assume that those services are there to provide that for you. It ends up what happening, you get there, you start to live there, and you're like, oh, this isn't something that works out for me daily. Now I need a car. And that adds to the transportation. So that's why some of this has to be thought through, and we have to think about what services are in these locations before we just jump in and go, yeah, great location, but what public service infrastructure is there to support the folks that are living there so that they can do what they need to do, maybe without a car.
So the third question that they asked, which pretty much I would define as a duh, do you support development of affordable housing on UVA property?
Why would they ask that question?
Well,
to reinforce the momentum of the project?
Well, I come from a different perspective. 89% obviously said yes. I'm surprised about the 8% indifferent. I didn't quite get that.
Why would they be in the meeting if they're 8% indifferent?
Yeah. But to talk a little bit about that from my perspective, the reason I think that question is an important question. So there was about a couple hundred people in the poll. I think it's important because here's the reality of it, is that what they're going to do, and I have a meeting at 2 o'clock with their consultant to talk a little bit about this, they're going to come up with their plan, they're going to designate a site. 9 times out of 10, it's going to have to get rezoned, right? The zoning is just not going to be there for it, more than likely. And I think in answering a question like this, if I was coming before either Ned or Lloyd, I can at least state, hey, 89% of the people, it's kind of a fact. It's a pop. It's a proof of performance kind of thing on it. But Ned, our dear friend Lloyd just walked into the studio and sitting to my right. Anything else you'd like to share before we say goodbye to you, sir?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I appreciated that land was the piece, because that always gets thrown about, right? I mean, sure. The city is, sometimes you hear about, well, where's the land available at? But then the second part of the question is always who owns the land, right? So the fact that, and I gave them credit last night for saying that, look, we're not the experts here, but this is something we could potentially contribute. And it's sending a message to folks that, yeah, if this land's available, then how everybody else is going to pitch in to make this happen. Because it is going to impact zoning, land use decisions. And if that is what UVA has, that's what I often hear from developers is the big hurdle to getting out of the way to keep costs down to provide affordable housing. So it's a piece of the puzzle that has been missing, and I was thrilled that it's going to be out there. So, we're going to be bringing our housing policy back to us here in the next just over a month in June, and I think the Planning Commission's already dealing with it. So I know the Board of Supervisors is looking forward to getting that housing policy done and voted on, and then just get to work putting it into action.
I was been part of that as far as the stakeholder committee, and Dr. Stacy Pepier and your crew over there has been doing an outstanding job on that. So, Ned, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ned.
Thank you. Have a great day. Go sell a couple of cars. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ned. Have a good one. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Ned Galloway, guys, Albemarle County Board of Supervisors Chairman. And Lloyd Snook is in the house here. Judah, if we can get Councilor Snook on screen, that would be great, sir. What'd you think of the interview with Ned? And then the second part I want to throw to you as we welcome Lloyd to the show is I really do have tremendous appreciation for UVA allocating the land. Another wrinkle that could help solve a little bit of a housing crunch is potentially asking or requiring, say, second years, maybe you go third years, to live on grounds and to free up some additional housing stock in the city of Charlottesville that would then trickle over to the urban ring in Albemarle
So
County.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
President Ryan actually made a point of speaking to that last night. That that is on, per his comments, is on track. It wasn't very specific, didn't give a lot of details, but the fact that I think that kind of when his opening remarks, he kind of talked a little bit about that. That's still on track. But today was important to me. We have the two most affected jurisdictions from a governmental perspective in the room today.
Sure.
We had Ned and
Councilor Snook.
Councilor Snook sitting to your left, my right. So why don't we introduce?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming to the show here. Just had Ned Galloway. We're dotting the I's and crossing the T's from this meeting that UVA hosted yesterday. Did you follow the meeting? Why don't we start opening
Yeah,
there?
I did.
What'd you make of it? Any takes?
It was both more than what we've seen in the past and less than what I was sort of hoping to hear.
Well said.
And I will say more than what we've seen in the past, in that UVA typically has been sort of a black box. All you know is that something comes out without really knowing what the inputs have been. And historically, we've not gotten a lot of public engagement in the development of plans. And so what they announced last night was a public engagement scheme that will involve a far greater degree of public engagement than we've ever seen. And that's great. I was hoping to learn a little bit more about what their suggestions were going to be. I mean, I now know whatever it's going to be on currently owned UVA property. That kind of limits the options as far as I'm aware. I mean, I don't know everything that UVA owns, but as I look at things that are sort of near to the city, or involving the city in some way. And I assume that any parcel that they would be talking about would be something fairly close to the city, or at least a significant portion of the land would be something fairly close to the city. There are only a couple of choices. And I could speculate. My speculation would be that it would be a lot of the land that's currently around St. Anne's Belfield. There's about 300 acres. It's essentially undeveloped out there. And
Is that good speculation?
So I sit on the engagement team, and
Yeah.
they've literally have not designated anything.
right.
Right.
And I don't mean
He's
to
crystal balling over
I'm
there.
crystal balling.
Yeah,
That's
no,
right.
I think that's great,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I wanted to do
Yeah.
today is to crystal ball a
Yeah, I
little
like
bit.
it.
And again, from a counselor's perspective, from an elected official's perspective, I think you're saying this is a good thing. At least
Yes.
they're being.
They're trying.
I'll use the word. They're being more transparent
Right.
than they've ever been, at least since I've been here in 1987.
Right. And I will go back to 1981 when I went on the Planning Commission, and I used to joke back then that I served on the committee that was supposed to be UVA and city and county, all Planning Commission level people, and that the UVA people who were on that committee were there to very politely say no to whatever it was we wanted them to do. And it was very frustrating in that respect because we didn't get much in the way of joint planning, which was the entire idea. So they have now allowed us, now said we are being allowed into their planning circles at an early enough stage that it's not going to be simply reactive and simply saying, oh, heck, you can do it anyway. You don't even need our permission. You're a state agency. We have no authority over you. And then we get to grouse. And historically, that's all we've been able to do. So they're proposing something that is important for, number one, because it involves a commitment by them of the single most difficult piece of affordable housing, and that is the land.
Correct.
If you don't have land being essentially donated, you don't have a project.
It's impossible.
Yeah, and so they're willing to take that first step. But it only makes sense, and I heard Ned talking about this earlier, it only makes sense if there's an infrastructure into which that housing development can be placed. He was talking about the Park Place project out on Rio Road
right.
by KTEC.
Right.
And there's a chicken and an egg problem. If you look at it and you say, well, that's not a good place to put things because there's no infrastructure around it. Well, the reason there's no infrastructure around it is that there's nothing to have infrastructure around. And so at some level, what has to happen is that everybody needs to sort of join hands together and walk at the same pace. And there may be a few things that have to happen first. When I was campaigning a couple of years ago, and affordable housing was, of course, the issue that everybody wanted to talk about. And I caught a lot of grief because I said at that time that that we're not going to be able to build our way out of the affordable housing problem in the city of Charlottesville. That it's going to have to be seen as a regional solution. It's going to have to be seen, and what the city can do is to say, if some developer wants to build something in Albemarle County in the near ring, we will promise that the Charlottesville Transit System will run buses out there on a regular enough basis. You can count on it for at least.
That's a pretty big deal right there.
That's
a big deal,
Well,
right?
that's
What
a
he
huge,
just said.
That's a huge statement.
Yeah, what you just said, that's
Yeah.
a big deal.
Because as
Right.
you were sitting down, you probably wasn't able to hear the balance.
Well, he watched Ned in his office, right?
Okay.
Is that what
I
you said?
watched for the first 10 minutes or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one of the things that came up in the conversation is the transportation.
Well,
Right.
that's the questions that are showing up on the feed. They're like, well, how do we get transportation there
Well,
to
I
these
think-
areas? And I think he just solved that.
What I'm saying is, if we say let's say the university says, we're going to put, and I'll come out with my crystal ball statement here. Let's assume for the purposes of conversation that we're talking about something on what used to be called the Faulkner property,
Yep.
which is the property that sort of surrounds St. Anne's Belfield. It has, and one of the indications I have in my own mind that this might be a good site is that if you look at the intersection with the bypass and Leonard Sandridge Boulevard or whatever it's called, that is an over-engineered intersection. It is engineered in a way that expects more action than it's currently getting. And so my guess is that they would say, we're going to have the main access to this 300 acres of developable property coming off the bypass right there. Because where else are you going to come off from? You're not going to come off Old Ivy Road.
Sure.
Yeah, there's no other good place to do it. So let's assume that that's what you're doing. Let's also assume then that the city says, in consultation with the UVA, in consultation with Albemarle County, that we're going to promise you that we will run a bus line up Leonard Sandridge into this subdivision. And if you put an affordable housing project in there, we'll make sure there's a bus stop there, and that we're committing ourselves to every half hour or something that there will be a bus.
But couldn't there be a partnership with UVA Transit also?
Could be.
Right?
Could be.
Because one of the important things that was talked about last night, and I think President Ryan was pretty clear about this, that this is not only for UVA folks, right?
Right.
Right? He was abundantly clear about that. But let's face it, a majority of the folks that will be in these particular things will more than likely work at some UVA establishment. I mean, they are the 10-ton, 20-ton employment elephant in the room. So there could be a partnership to include a joint, right, into that.
Well, UVA, before COVID, was running buses to Buckingham County to pick up employees.
I did not
And then
know that.
COVID kept those buses from running. So right before COVID, they were rolling out a bus system all over Central Virginia to bus their employees, kind of like what you proposed in your campaign. They're called park and rides. Kind of like a park and ride concept.
Yeah, sure.
So they were taking buses out to various points. People were getting in, and then they were dropping them back off when the shift was over. But then COVID crushed that.
Yeah.
Well, and in fact, there are similar projects underway with Crozet. And I don't remember whether this got implemented before COVID or not, but to go over to Waynesboro and Stanton and bring people across the mountain.
I believe there was, if I remember, there was some discussion at the Planning District Commission about that, and probably it's running around somewhere in between my
Right.
2 ears. But
Yeah. So
can't come
the
up-
point is that I think we're moving in that direction. And I personally think that that is the long-term future, not only from the affordable housing piece, but also if you look at what I expect the development will continue to be in downtown Charlottesville. How are we going to get all of the employees here? Can we park their cars here? No, we can't. The new buildings that are under development, yes, there's some parking associated with the code building, about 100 spaces, but you probably need 500 spaces. Yes, there's parking associated with 323 Garrett, but again, 200 spaces, you probably need 500. So there's going to be a huge shortfall number of parking spaces. The way to solve that problem, and the only way to solve that problem, if you're not going to build parking garages at the cost of roughly $50,000 per space, which does not make sense, is some sort of park and ride system. So I think that's the long-term future, and there's a planning grant that is being administered by the TJPDC right now, two planning grants actually, to work on this kind of regional transit. And but to me, what the city can end up doing out of all of this is to say, yes, we will work on a way to get transit there on a reliable basis, so that, like in Northern Virginia with the Metro, once they announced where the Metro line was going to be, apartment buildings sprang up to be open at the same time that the Metro stop opens. So if we tell people we're going to have a bus system out there, then developers can behave accordingly. And if it means coordinating with University Transit, I mean, there have been proposals to merge University Transit with Charlottesville Transit. There are a lot of procedural, there have been a lot of obstacles to that.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a lot of technical, legal obstacles to it, only one of which is the UTS's reliance on student bus drivers and this kind of thing.
There's a couple of loopholes, but I think we're at a point in time, and maybe this is just me being a super optimistic person. I think we're at a time where these things are going to start coming together. I have a meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock with Dr. Gina Merritt, who's the consultant, right? I'm tend to talk to her about the transit component when we get together. But as you also know, I chair the Regional Housing Partnership, which is kind of built around trying to bring all these 4 pillars of what I call an affordable housing a healthy housing system in. I just think that the timing is right, that we actually can get this done. And I was wondering, do you share that same mindset, or am I a little Pollyannic about it?
I hope so. I've been saying for a couple of years now that I think we have a confluence of interest from the county, interest from the city, interest from the university.
Sure. Land, incredible demand for the area, low interest rates, all the inventory is going away.
Right, and because UVA is willing to throw their land into this thing, that makes a number of things start to become doable.
Very quickly.
Yeah, and I think that there are enough resources that can be brought to bear quickly enough, and quite frankly, I mean, it's possible that in the next 2 years, as both the city and the county are dealing with federal funds coming out of the COVID bill, there may be opportunities to leverage some of that money into some of this kind of planning. So there are a lot of things we can do. I will say one of the biggest problems
How could we leverage that money into this kind of planning? How so?
Suppose that the proposal is put together. Well, let me give you a couple of examples. There is money specifically set aside for transit. Millions and millions of dollars will be available to the Charlottesville transit system, or to CAT, to enable, among other things,
survival.
To enable no fare. The no fare system, and there'll also be a lot of other funds available that will help us do things that we may have wanted to be able to do but haven't been able to do. So there's also more housing money. It's not to build housing per se, as far as I'm aware. Now, I have to say, we won't know for probably another month what all the ground rules are for the federal funds. But I don't expect it to be construction money, but I do expect it to be planning money. Sure. I do expect there to be some things like that we can do. So we may be able to start doing a lot of that. There is also some federal funds flowing through. I'm blanking on the correct acronym, DHCD, I think, Virginia.
Oh, we got more acronyms than we know what to do with on our line of work.
And so there's some money flowing through there. One of the real complications right now is that the cost of wood has tripled in the last year.
So that's an interesting point, because I'm taking notes feverishly as you're speaking. And one of my concerns about this announcement, and concerns are a strong word. One of the things that got my wheels turning, the UVA is speaking about doing this between, 1,000 to 1,500 homes
in the next
units.
10 years.
I can't see that timeline happening, right? And the reason I say that is just this is something that I've been preaching on the show forever, is turning red tape into green tape, right? So if there's some way to streamline that, but UVA is going to go through this process. I suspect it's going to take the rest of this year, right? More than likely. And it's a great thing, and it should be done. But then they're going to have to send out the request for proposals. That's going to take its own time. Then let's assume it's in the city of Charlottesville, right? Let's assume we have to rezone it. Then we have to go through your process to rezone it.
So you're basically saying marketplace dynamics will change years down the road, and the cost of goods could have upticked 2x, 1.5,
or the other way.
Or go the other way.
It could go the other way.
It's too far down the road, is what you're saying.
I think what I'm trying to say is, I think just have that conversation about cost of construction at this point is a little unrealistic, right? Because it's just going to change down that point. The point I'm really trying to make is that if we're trying to do something now, now is not now.
Now is 2 years from now at least.
More than that, because then you got to develop, you got to go through the site plan process, then you got to build it and develop it. Now is 4 years, maybe 5 years from now. And that's one of the conversations I intend to have with Dr. Gina Merritt about, okay, what can we do now? I mean, really now. What can we do to really provide something? Because people are hurting now. People need this now.
Well, his idea that he started the interview with about extra bus stops deeper into Albemarle is right now.
No, but
that could help now.
Well, Lloyd, and jump in, because you're the expert on this. Now is not necessarily now, because we got a bunch of legal hurdles to go by to actually implement.
Can CAT do the extra bus stops now?
No.
It takes a long time to do that?
Well, I suppose we could wave a magic wand and say, Shazam, we're going to do it.
Sure.
But the question is, my proposal was to link it to developments, to link it to future developments in particular.
Gotcha.
You could also link it to current apartment complexes that are under development. But just as an example, there's a huge amount of development occurring out on 29 North. Out past Airport Road, there are all those things on the east side.
Yeah.
I have no idea how many units there are, but there got to be into the many hundreds, if not thousands, of units there. We also know...
You're speaking of Brook Hill.
If that's the name.
Yeah, and it is in the thousands.
Yeah. So those are folks many of whom may work at NGIC or places like that, but many of them, as you said, the largest source of employment is UVA by far, and even if you've got a husband and wife couple and the husband works at NGIC, the wife may work at UVA. So there's going to be a lot of demand, it seems to me, for transit services, any place you've got enough density of development to have it make sense, either density of the residential development at one end or the density of the employment development at the other end. So that's something I think that is going to have to be looked at in the next year, and I'm hoping that the planning grants that are currently underway, the planning that is currently underway is going to reflect some of that. The other thing to reflect on is, as you look at the notion of park and ride lots, there's nothing else going on in Fashion Square right now. Fashion Square, Albemarle Square, those are vast expanses of parking lots that if we were to say, and we could say pretty quickly, we're going to run buses essentially from Fashion Square down to UVA and back, with maybe a couple of intermediate stops, but boom, there it is. And my guess is that you could have, if we set up a system where we told everybody these buses are going to run at least every half hour, maybe every 15 minutes, that people would come to recognize that this is a reliable thing, I can count on it, I'm going to organize my life around it, because that's really what has to happen. If you look at Northern Virginia, people who live up there, they organize their lives around transit. They organize their lives around how they get to and from work, how they get anywhere. I mean,
That's a legit idea right there.
yeah.
That would help.
And in Charlottesville and Albemarle County have a legislative tool in their toolbox that currently the rest of the state doesn't have. Lloyd can surely quote it chapter and verse, but to make a long story short, if it's related to affordable housing in the city of Charlottesville, Albemarle, you guys can pretty much do whatever you want, right? You
This
have
is the
to
paragraph we were talking
correct,
about.
yeah. So
Sunshine and Dan.
there's a provision within the state code, as you
Right.
well know, that
Charlottesville just got added to it. It applied to Albemarle all along. This past year, in the 2020 session, they added Charlottesville to it so that we can do all kinds of things under the title of affordable housing that we didn't used to be able to do.
And the reason I bring it up is we've been talking, and that's what I love about these
Yeah,
shows. The
so good,
conversations just
right?
kind of go. But we've been talking about transit at this particular point in time. And, one of the struggles, at least from a city's perspective, and the county has the same issue, is the parking requirements, right? And if Lloyd's plan comes together, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lloyd, and this provision kind of says, hey, if you meet certain boxes under affordable housing, we will reduce your parking requirements. Because that's kind of a problem, because when you start paying for stacked apartment, covered or elevated parking, that could be like 50, 60 grand a parking spot,
Right.
if not more. And so what you're doing is you're taking away from the housing component. Is that something that, if we can Gina gets this process going, we've got a parcel designated, I think that's where everybody needs to come together and say, okay, what can we do to streamline this? Is that something that makes sense to you, Lloyd?
Well, the parking problem, we have not typically thought of it as being a housing issue, but it is.
It is.
It is both parking for apartments and also parking at the other end. Where are you going to drive to? You can drive to work. If you don't need to drive to work, you don't need a car, perhaps, at your home. Or maybe you have one car for what would otherwise be a two-car family or something like that. So there are a lot of things like that. We have not. It's been a long time since the city has gone through. It seems like every 5 years we would go through a parking study and come out with some new theory as to how we were going to rearrange the parking rules to reflect whatever our current thinking was. And the last time we did that was 2017, and we came out with a new scheme, which then August 2017 happened, and then people downtown started saying, well, we're having problems enough getting people to come downtown at all. Let's remove the parking meters. Let's go back to the way things used to be. So
I can add from a practical perspective on this. We've been talking about on the show forever. For about 4 years, I've been trying to put a affordable housing deal together on the IGA property.
Kim's Market.
Kim's Market, right, on
Cherry Avenue, yeah.
And literally, I put on my recovering developer hat, and we sit down with the engineers. The first thing you look at is how many parking spots am I going to need?
Yeah.
You literally start with parking. And that, to me, is just inherently wrong.
Well, and we have certain areas.
It's what you have left, right? So
Yeah.
we need now this much acreage, and oh my God, I can't fit the units on it.
We have certain areas of the city where there are no parking requirements. Downtown, for
Yeah.
example. And the assumption is that people on the downtown mall are going to be served by the parking garages. and that covers the demand. We can loosen up the parking requirements. We can have fewer parking spaces required in certain areas. At some point, there gets to be a trade-off, and how that trade-off gets made the willingness to make that trade-off seems to fluctuate over time, and every few years it goes in a different direction, and people get very judgmental about how could you have made that determination 5 years ago when at the time it seemed like the reasonable thing to do.
Well, I think that trade-off is actually happening right now with this garage for the Guadalajara.
Well, there's a
Lucky 7.
discussion.
That's not going to happen.
Well, there's a discussion going on Facebook with a mutual friend of ours about, hey,
Matthew
Yeah.
Gillikin is who
Yeah.
we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what's happening right now, right?
Well, yeah, and partly because of different demand curves, rather than a different philosophy. But there are differences in philosophy that are showing up in all of this also. So it's a constantly shifting target is one of the problems.
no, if this was easy stuff and all you did was this, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about
right.
it, right? But I do want to go to a couple of those questions from yesterday. One of them, as I was talking to Ned, was kind of a duh question. Do you support, building on UVA property?
Sure.
That was
Who doesn't,
Yeah, right, well, 89% do.
Right.
Right.
3% said no, and I'm wondering what's their problem
That's
with
what
it.
we were wondering.
Well, I was wondering who 8% was indifferent.
Right. Why were they in the meeting?
Why were they in the meeting?
Right.
But it was interesting. So the second slide on that was what is the most desirable amenity for affordable housing? And that's the one that was split up the most, which I was a little surprised to see. The community center was 27% was number 2. Community services community center was number 1. I apologize. Community services was number 2. They were awfully close, 24% versus 27. Green space, 20%. Educational support at 15, and the last one was job training. Didn't see much in there about transit, which was a little surprising to me. And it seems like that's where you landed and Ned landed, which I'll surely share with the good doctor today at 2:00. And any thoughts on that?
Well, there was specifically a question that was posed that I believe J.J. Davis answered that said, yes, transit is certainly one of the things they're going to be looking at.
I may have been taking notes and missed that at that time. Thank you.
So it's the questions that were asked, because of course we had to pose the questions before we even knew what they were going to say. So it made it rather difficult to have any kind of interesting question posed, any incisive question posed. But the transit thing is certainly. It's got to be a piece of it. If you look at the way we talk about housing costs, and when is a housing cost unsustainable, the current thinking is you really have to meld housing with transportation costs, because what is affordable when you're living right next to your place of employment may be very different from what is affordable if you're living 15 miles out of town.
It's well said.
And then the other question was what aspect of affordable housing is most important to you? And the first two was kind of made sense, which was the levels of affordability and location. Those were up in the low to high 80s or mid 80s. The scale question, as I was we were speaking to Ned, really caught me off guard because, and maybe I was just wearing my recovering developer hat a little bit too much, but it seems scale was always one of these first things you start looking at and questions. I'm just curious your read on that scale question.
As I looked at the question and was trying to figure out how I would answer it, I answered affordability and location, or maybe the other way around. I don't remember how I did it. The scale of the building, my interpretation of not answering it with that was to say, it didn't bother me. I didn't care particularly. I wasn't horrified. I wasn't going to sit there and say, this is going to be too big, too much, not in my backyard. So I think the people who were on the call last night were people who were not NIMBY people.
That's an interesting thought, and I hopefully when
that's fair. That's a fair statement.
I would definitely fair, but it's funny because believe it was JJ who referenced the small area plan from Cherry Avenue.
There was a question asked about it specifically.
There was, thank
Yeah.
you. And it's interesting because, as part of the commission, I kind of get to read some of this stuff on a regular basis. And scale was such a big issue in that.
It is for Cherry Avenue, no question.
It is. And so it just struck me as odd. And again, maybe that's I didn't think that through. Maybe the reality of it was there was a bunch of YIMBYs on here now, no NIMBYs, and that's why scale was such lowly done. So thank you for bringing that clarity to me, because I'm struggling all morning. How come that number was so low? But I think you landed on it.
The Cherry Avenue Small Area Plan is an interesting document because as you sort of juxtapose that with the affordable housing plans and so on, and at least the first draft of the land use plan, one of the big issues that I think the Cherry Avenue Small Area Plan was dealing with was, we feel like we're already under pressure, don't make it worse for us. And the city has said in its affordable housing plan that as a general proposition, we should be looking to increase housing and housing density, but not in areas that have historically been African American, dense, sort of, the place where we always end up sticking affordable housing. And so what I look on the Cherry Avenue Small Area Plan as being in part a reflection of that attitude, complicated though by the fact that if you're looking for large chunks of like multiple acres of land that are developable, there are more in the Cherry Avenue area than there are just about any other place in town.
That is correct.
And so if you're going to be building more housing, where are you going to do it? You're going to build it where you don't have to tear down a whole bunch of other stuff.
To add a little bit to that, one of the reasons I've always been looking at this, there's transportation. It's right there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's multiple
It's
stops.
close to the hospital, UVA. It's close to downtown. It's close to everything. It's in the heart of town.
That's exactly
By
right.
a park.
It's just need $4 million.
Yeah, you need some money. Yeah.
That's all. But
I got a question.
Yeah,
This is
sure.
from the feed. So Neil Williamson is watching. You got your friends at NBC 29 and CBS 19 watching you here, Lloyd. This question's from Brian. He says, I live in Belmont, Counselor Snook. I'm all for affordable housing, but I'm also a realist. There's no more land in Charlottesville. There's very little land in Charlottesville. How do we incentivize our partner with Albemarle County to use their most valuable resource, their land, to create affordable housing for this community? Your idea for extra bus stops was a very good one.
Thank you.
That's from Brian in Belmont.
Well, and that's one of the few things that we can offer. I mean, let's face it, either whether it's UVA, whether it's Albemarle County, land is the first and often insurmountable hurdle. And if we're not in a position in the city to provide much land for that, all we can do is to try to facilitate things in some way to make a development on county or UVA or UVA property more feasible. And so we'll do what we can do.
But everybody's at the table, which is really never, at least from my experience from 1987, I don't have quite the many years as Lloyd has, but it's really the first time since I've been actively involved in it, which has been over 10 years.
Well, I think it's because it's the worst it's ever been.
Yeah.
From an affordable housing standpoint, from an inventory standpoint, from a potential standpoint.
Sure.
I mean, you just don't see any, like he said, the best place to create more housing is in a historically black neighborhood.
Sure.
I mean, talk about a conundrum right there.
Right.
I mean, has it gotten any worse than it is, but right now?
Well, it just seems like history's trying to repeat itself a little bit, right? But again, I'm an optimistic guy. We're all optimistic folks in here. We all believe we can get there. Is it going to be perfect? Nah, probably not, right? Are we going to make a lot of mistakes between here and there? Absolutely. But I think the key is that everybody involved in it needs to focus around this one word called transparency, right? And this is what we're doing here, and hopefully we'll continue to do it on the network. my concern is time. I keep on going back to time, right? The need is now. The things that we're talking about is great, but we're really not going to put, seats in seats, or we're not going to put bodies in homes probably 4 or 5 years from now.
At the earliest.
At the earliest.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I threw out pre-COVID in one of these meetings I was in, I said, guys, I'm partial to the land trust just because I chair it. I have to be.
Love
right, right. But there's, Habitat, PH, there's great. And, hey, UVA, do you have like a small lot or something that we can try to do your famous pop, right?
Sure.
We can try to create something small, right?
Sure.
Let's show we're actually doing something, right? Something that's on a bus line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or something that, okay, we can get a bus out to it or something like that. And my concern is, I was thinking about this morning. You're a sports guy.
Mm-hmm.
How do you win a baseball game?
You score more runs than the other team.
Okay, you play short ball, right? Get on first
Small
base.
ball.
Small ball. Thank you.
Yeah.
Small ball.
This guy's a baseball fan.
That's right.
Got it, right? You play small ball, If Lloyd gets up to the bat and you're the coach or the manager, and I need you to hit a home run every time you're at the bat, you're not going to win, right?
Yeah.
So this is a great thing. This 1,000, 1,500 homes is great. It's great. It's a great thing to get to. But what are we doing now? And that was my proposal, and I'm going to continue to push it, but I kind of got, okay, well, this is what we're doing, and I picked up on the hint.
Is it still, Councilor Snook, is it still the priority that it was when you ran for office?
Oh, yes.
You still think it is?
Yes.
With the same steam and momentum? Because that
I
was
think
the
so.
top
I think so.
priority.
Now, let me add one other piece to this, and that is that in the course of the next 6 to 8 months, as we're talking about the new land use plan, the new zoning ordinance, there is going to be a lot of talk about about having to revise the land use plan and the zoning ordinance to allow for missing middle construction.
There you go.
Duplex, triplex, quadplex, things like that. There has already been a lot of blowback on the social media sites and so on over the proposals. Just to use an example, the area on Greenbrier Drive in Charlottesville, right next to Rio Road, there's a strip there where it's thought that's being proposed for some of the missing middle kinds of construction. We're not talking about huge apartment complexes, but anyway. So the idea is that you try to have some nodes of more density, and also to take advantage of perhaps the commercial spaces that are right across the street, and so on. So there's been a lot of talk, and people have been horrified. Oh my God, you're going to have a huge apartment building right in my backyard. First of all, and this is the thing that I tried to talk about during the campaign, was anything like that where we're changing the land use plan and we're changing the zoning ordinance to allow certain things doesn't mean that those things are going to happen. And it certainly doesn't mean they're going to happen in the short run. The people who live there may live there for 20 more years before they sell the property to somebody who does something different with it.
It's jumped from, just recently, it's jumped from an average of 5 to 6 years folks stayed in their home to 9, and it's just continuing to grow. And that's part of,
Yeah.
we talk about all the time, the lack of inventory, and I was thinking about this the other day. That's a factor nobody's talking about.
Sure, people are staying sticky. They're staying in the inventory longer.
Yeah.
Stay in the inventory.
But the point that I want to make is that the rezoning kinds of things are an even longer term change. They are not going to cause immediate changes. If we pass these ordinances and pass this land use plan, it will be years before those changes make significant differences in the housing market. And so, and more than the 5 years that Keith's talking about. So if we're going to do anything that is going to move even relatively quickly, this is the kind of project that is going to move more quickly than the things that we're going to invest a lot of political blood and sweat over in the next year.
So the reason why time is so important to me, and I apologize, I was trying to find some stats on my phone real quickly on it, but the Mortgage Bankers Association and Fannie and Freddie put out an estimate, their crystal ball, and they're projecting this trend that we're currently in to go through 2022 as a minimum. Right, I was trying to look for the actual stats.
What trend specifically
are
you talking
about? Lack of inventory.
Well, I mean, and throw in what's going to compound it is you got Dexcom opening Dairy Market, Dairy Central. Mm-hmm. You got UVA saying they're hiring more people. You got UVA bringing more students in every year. They all need somewhere to sleep and live and stay. I mean, it's not like we're going to get less popular or less interested with people wanting to move here. And then what did you informed everyone on your show here? Realtor Magazine said baby boomers are moving to the Charlottesville metropolitan area, the second most of any area in the country.
So yeah, and this in 2020, so this was a company that analyzes moving, right?
Yeah.
So actually, how you actually
they
move.
have the data.
They have the data.
Yeah.
Number 2 in the whole United States was Charlottesville. Number 3 was Waynesboro.
Wow.
So
For baby boomers moving, they're choosing to move. Right.
Well, I've said all along, affordable housing in this market means Waynesboro, Buckingham, and Louisa.
Well, is this the fly?
You do it. You
Okay.
do it.
So initially, 2 years ago when we started the show, it was drive till you qualify. So like get in your car, you can afford Waynesboro, you're driving. Now they've coined it fly.
Well, Quentin Beckham has.
Quentin Beckham has coined it fly till you qualify.
Wow.
Because you're having to go even further.
Well, the reason that is, Harrisonburg is number 9 in the country for first-time home buyers.
Huh.
And just to put a little perspective to it, I had to get an MRI, so forth and so on, and the tech was from Harrisonburg. And I went, really? And then he started telling me his story, and it's an hour and 15-minute drive, and he could afford what he wanted, so forth and so on. Now he works a couple of 12s, and he made it work.
And podcasts for the drive, so what the heck?
Well, he listens to this show.
Hopefully it's the I Love Stephen Network Lord. This is a good place to finish with this question right here. It's an open-ended question. Why not just let marketplace dynamics play out, like you guys have talked about on the show, in the Charlottesville area and much of the Albemarle County urban ring? It's just going to be extremely expensive to live. And then the outer counties in Central Virginia will be strengthened by folks that are looking for more affordable housing.
Well, the question is, what exactly does it mean to let more market forces work? For example, market forces always have to work within a system. And if the system within which those market forces are working is a certain zoning, you may get much more urban sprawl. You may get, or if it's a different kind of zoning system, then you may get more condensed residential options. And so it's sort of a misnomer to say we're just going to let market conditions do what they will, because the market conditions are always going to be responsive to the regulatory environment. It is legitimately a question to say, how, for example, to distinguish between changing the regulatory environment and deciding to make literal government subsidies for some of these projects. That's a different discussion to have. Overall, though, the concern is that we as a society are more than just an accumulation of economic units. And we have to decide what kind of a society we want to have. If we leave things entirely unregulated, uninterfered with, we are highly likely, if past recent trends play out, to become a much whiter, much richer.
It would be a rich white playground.
Right, we're a rich white playground until such time as we get back to the flight patterns of 50 years ago. And so there's this cycle that cities and metropolitan areas tend to go through. If we really want to be Palo Alto, we could be Palo Alto. I don't think we really want to be Palo Alto. I think we want to have a community that is much more mixed in economic terms, in cultural terms, in racial terms, and but that's a decision that I know people disagree on. I favor the diversity solution, and I think we ought to be working towards it.
So Lloyd is 100% correct. We're free market folks, right? Without a doubt. But the reality of it is it's controlled free market. The zoning, and then we are missing the site plan portion of it, right, which is two halves of one whole, controls this. And so what they've done, and I'm part of a cohort out in Portland and Seattle, I talk about this all the time on the show, and what they've done for affordable housing, and now that if we can get UVA, and we will get UVA adding the land component to it, what they've done out there is they said, okay, affordable housing, for-profit, non-profit, it doesn't really matter, you check these boxes, it drops right down. And then what will happen is you'll get your diversity of neighborhoods. And diversity is a good thing. It's a great thing. Mm-hmm. You know, we talk about this all the time. I despise the drive till you qualify, but it's the reality of it. Now we're flying apparently, so we have to, I don't know how that's going to work, but get everybody helicopters, I guess, or something. But Lloyd, thank you for
Yeah,
thank
you
you,
were great.
thank
Glad
you
to
for
be here.
everything.
This was fun.
Any closing remarks real quick, if you'd like?
Only that I am gratified that the university is taking these steps. I look forward to trying to work with them to bring as many new units online as quickly as we can. If there are things from the city's perspective in terms of regulatory hurdles that need to be addressed, I hope that one of the things that will happen in the next 6 to 8 months is that we hire a new director of NDS. We begin to get some of the bureaucratic wrinkles there ironed out. We get a new zoning ordinance that is perhaps more conducive to some of this kind of stuff. I think the city is going to be working in that direction. We would love to work with the university, and if we're told up front, here are some things that would make our lives a whole lot easier, not just from the university, but from any developer of affordable housing. Let's talk about that now. While we're rewriting the ordinance, while we're rewriting the land use plan, I think we're all headed in the same direction. I'd like to be in the same bus.
Wrote that down. We will talk to Dr. Gina Merritt today about that.
Well
Thank
said.
you, sir, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming here. I know you're a busy man, and it meant the world to us to spend some
Appreciate
time
it.
with us.
Good to see you, Lloyd.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Good show, good interviews.
Yeah.
What do you want to dot the I's and cross the T's?
Yeah, so, you know, again, this whole month we focused on this, and what Lloyd was talking about was, you know, how I kind of started this month was the zoning create these invisible walls, right? Do they create these invisible walls which pushes folks out, and then you start your driving to your qualifying, you're flying to your qualifying. So, you know, this has been a lot of fun this month. Hopefully we've accomplished some
Best
stuff.
month of your show
Oh, well, thank
to
you.
date. It's serious. I mean that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, our show, we do this together. So, you know, I'm now, the problem with that is, oh my God, what am I doing next month? Right? How do you top that? Lloyd, thank you for your time, sir. We actually have on Monday coming in 2 loan officers. We're going to do a rock star roundtable.
Tuesday show?
On Tuesday's show. And
Let me throw this to you.
sure.
I'm going to give you some factors, some things that are colliding all at the same time. We have UVA hiring more people every year.
Mm-hmm.
We have more UVA students being admitted every year.
Mm-hmm.
They're a business. They want to make money. How they make money in part is enrolling students. We have limited land in the city. You got interest rates at generational lows. You have cost of goods and cost of construction skyrocketing. You got baby boomers from all over the country moving to the area. You got major employers moving to the area. Dexcom's about to open. They're just riding the coattails and cherry-picking talent from UVA and hoping to funnel that talent. You got Counselor Snook saying you got the code building coming on the market. Ton of people going to the code building, working there. The 323 building, which I think is Oliver Kutner's building, kind of
is.
close to ACAC, about to boom.
And Apex.
Apex Clean Energy.
What an awesome building that is.
I mean, it's amazing. right? So I mean, you have an affordable housing plan that you identified intelligently that is going to come to market 5 to 6 years down the road from now.
Look, unless everybody does what Lloyd is saying, and this is why I put so much time and energy into this. If we can streamline this a little bit, then we can walk that back. But just from the practical construction portion of it, we waved the magic wand. Parcel is there, it's zoned, site plan is done, all this great stuff is done. You've got a couple of years just of site development. Infrastructure is going to have to be, water and sewer in and out, and building before folks can sit in it. That's the reason I've been pushing this. Hey, and I stole this idea totally from you. This POP thing. Hey, let's find something that we can do today.
That's why I think the fastest path to POP, proof of performance, is a number of ones. It's get second years, maybe third years living on grounds.
So I'm going to ask you a question about
Sure.
that when you're ready.
Please. If they can get second years or third years and require them to live on grounds like they do first years, that's going to open up thousands of rooftops in the city.
It
And
will.
if thousands of rooftops are open in the city, that's going to have a trickle-over impact to Albemarle, to the urban ring. Thousands of rooftops are a big deal. B, quickest path to POP. That idea that he had,
Awesome.
where he's like, let's get more bus stops out into densely populated areas, or let's use the bus stop next to an apartment building.
And one of the boxes to check in this
It's
is
transportation.
not only transportation.
Reliable.
No, from the developer's perspective, hey, you need to provide
So
X
less
number
parking spots.
X number of bus stops within
Yeah.
your subdivision or within your development.
Yeah, that's legit. That's a B.
Sure.
I loved when he
Yeah.
was doing. I mean, he was pontificating on the show and
Yeah,
crystal balling.
Yeah, I think that's a big statement that he made.
I thought it was a great statement. I literally, when he said it, I turned and then I looked at you and I said, "Did you hear that?"
Our chemistry was working. I very rarely see.
Yeah, you stopped what you were doing. We both did. We looked at each other and then we looked at
I was
him.
researching numbers and
Yeah.
I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
I can't believe I just heard
Right?
that.
And then the C, the third thing would be, what if some of that land was allocated, even just a sliver, to the land trust?
Yeah.
You guys could come to market a lot faster than 5 or 6 years.
So in a way, that was my pitch on this short-term POP, right? If there's a parcel or something available that we can put on 2 or 3 townhomes or something like that on it, though at least we can get the ball going in the right direction. And it does a couple of things, right? I'm 1,000% in support of the 1,000 to 1,500. That is the right approach. But if you do something a little bit short term, what it does, and Lloyd was pretty much saying it builds the trust and the transparency.
Right.
Right? And that's kind of what's missing a little bit at UVA, and I'm so glad they're at the table, and I'll say this, all the meetings I've been in, they recognize that. They privately recognize we've got to build trust, we've got to build transparency. Look, they've been doing it one way for, how long has the university been around? A couple hundred years, whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
I probably got myself into a little bit of trouble. I probably should know how long it's been around. But so they're slowly changing. So it's a positive thing. But, I'm going to continue to push, hey, let's do a short-term fix. And if it's not with the land trust, which Habitat's a great organization and can solve that problem just as easy and effectively as we can on that end of it.
202 years.
Thank
it
you.
was founded in 1819, so you were right on point.
I was a couple hundred. I figured I'd be close.
Yeah, you did a good job right there.
That was a good guess.
And throw this out
Couldn't
there.
Google him fast enough.
Another frustrating wrinkle to all this as we close is the most land that's out there in the city of Charlottesville to develop is in Fifeville and Cherry Avenue.
Yeah.
You throw in another frustrating wrinkle that the land that we have to develop is in a historically African American community, and there's already the very bitter and ugly history of redeveloping Vinegar Hill.
Well, it's real simple. I mean, if you're going to develop Cherry Avenue, you better brush out the Cherry Avenue small area plan.
Oh, every stakeholder in Cherry Avenue should be consulted.
Well, it was in this plan, and there is a
There is one.
There is one. So if you're going to do this, and that's the reason why this parcel isn't moved, because in order for the math to work, the density has to be so much larger than what this plan is calling for. It's just everybody just goes no, 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 and then of course you've got to have 1.5 parking spots per. It's just the parking is just insane. The requirements that they have. Question for you, if we got time.
Oh yeah, plenty of time. I love this Today Show. It's been
You're
fantastic.
a UVA grad.
Yeah.
How would you feel when you were going through school, having to be required to be there in year 2?
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up. Is my second year, my buddies and I stayed in Lambeth Commons, which is technically on UVA grounds. It's UVA housing. And it was a phenomenal experience. We were all fraternity guys. I was a Phi Kappa Psi, and Lambeth is right there, across from where U-Haul used to be, where Carmelo's and the Panda Garden used to be.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And back there off of Emmett Street, we were 456-4, second floor unit in Lambeth Commons. And we could just walk to Rugby Road, and I was at Phi Psi in 3 or 4 minutes. I don't think it would be as big a deal as people
Maybe
thought.
Orbits too, huh?
Or I was at the bar. I mean, James knows is at the bar all the time. I don't think it would be as big a deal as people would make it out to be.
No, I'm just thinking from a student's perspective.
If they took just second years and say just second years have to live on grounds, that's like 4,000 to 5,000 rooftops.
Yeah, so I wouldn't know what the number is but we know this much. If they do that, between the 1,000 and the 1,500 that the new units are talking about,
Yeah,
this would
you've 3x'd it.
yeah, but the issue would be is will they be affordable at that point, right?
But you've taught me this. And
Yeah.
Michael Payne taught me this.
yeah, it's true.
And this is the frustration I have, and we don't name names.
Sure.
It's this frustration I have with certain policy decision making.
Sure.
Is any inventory is good for the housing ecosystem.
Absolutely it is.
Even if that inventory is at the high end,
Sure.
it helps open up something at the low end.
Yep, absolutely.
You taught me that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you're 100% right. So I don't think I could say it any better than you just said it, but it's true. Any inventory
It's good.
is
Even
good.
if it's expensive, it's
But
good.
We'll talk about this on Tuesday. And again, I was trying to get some exact numbers, but the experts, are now projecting what we're dealing with right now, the market conditions.
It's going to be worse and amplified and continued.
Well, I think you're going to see some neutral balancing out. But the reality of it is the inventory is so low, the demand is so high, some version of what we currently are seeing today, maybe not so 15 offers or 20 offers or that kind of thing on it, but you're going to see this projection going forward for a few years ahead. And for organizations like brokers organizations to predict that now is saying quite a bit.
Well, I enjoy this show so much. I want to continue the conversation. I got so much more
No,
I can
yeah,
talk to you.
yeah.
I know it. And it really only puts him in the tight spot.
Yeah.
Because all I got to do at the 12:30 is sit here and talk to somebody
And I
like
love him
this.
dearly,
Yeah,
and
right.
I don't want to
But
do this
I still want to have this conversation with you. We're going to look back on this, and you and I both, we'll cut to the chase. You and I both have a gift of being able to see a little bit down the road. You call it vision. I think it's called vision, right?
I would agree with that.
That's one of our skills that's made it successful in business.
When my vision gets a little cloudy, that's the reason I do a little traveling. I go away, try to get my vision back, and come back.
Okay. So vision is telling me that COVID is going to dramatically amplify the affordable housing crisis. And COVID is going to further evolve Charlottesville area into this Palo Alto, San Francisco example. Faster than we ever thought it was going to happen.
That's the reason.
Faster than it ever thought it was going to happen.
You know, I was asked by somebody the other day, geez, you seem to be talking a lot about this affordable housing on Real Talk. And
Was this a gentleman with the initials TD?
Actually, no, it was some other folks,
Okay.
and I explained the reason why we tackled this, right? And that's okay. We're going to have a little bit more traditional real estate in May, but I wanted to get this out, particularly with Fair Housing Month, right? To kind of put a little bit of a bow around that, how important this is. But at the end of the day, as the good Dr. Lisa Sturtevant said, and I'll shut up here
It
in a
doesn't
minute.
seem like local government can respond fast enough to keep up with marketplace dynamics.
Yeah, I've been
You see
here,
what I'm saying?
I've been here since '87. This trajectory has been going forward, even during the depression, the housing depression. We were still eking up 3%. 4% increase year over year. We've never really gone backwards like some other jurisdictions. And a lot of it is this conversation we're having today, that 20-ton elephant or 100-ton elephant, whatever you want to call it. But we got to go.
We gotta go.
We got to go. Thank you.
Keith
Thank you.
Smith, how's the weekend? Is it good?
Yeah, a busy weekend. I'm actually going to
You
get...
just got a new listing. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah, I just got the email.
I got it.
Right. New YRP listing.
They really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Literally, I got the email here.
Yeah. What
Thank you, Emily Funk.
Emily.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big believer of hiring really good
And
people.
getting out of their
and
way.
getting the hell out of their
Well,
way.
congratulations on the new listing.
Hey, thanks. What are we selling? I don't know.
Get to work.
Get the
Keith.
work. No, you get the work. You push
This
it.
man
up.
is great people. He's Keith Smith.
thank you.
You could tell he is great people. Today's show was dynamite. I mean, it was absolutely, the whole month has been damn good.
Thank you for doing this. Right.
It's been so fun.
Yeah, but I threw this at you guys to make this happen. And again, like hiring good people, that's what we do. Hire good people, get the hell out of the way. So we couldn't be doing this without you. Definitely without
Liza.
Judah. Well, I was going to say Judah first, then Liza.
Yeah.
But Liza's angry with me because I forgot Bones. We got to go.
We got to go. Judith,
Who do you got at
thank you.
12:30?
Sorry, we got the owner of Fly Dog Yoga, Eliza Whitman. And we're going to talk about how she kept her business alive
In person?
during COVID. Now they're getting to open back up again.
No, she's going to be here.
Oh,
in
she's
person?
gonna be here in
Good,
person.
I'm going to leave.
We're coming back
because
to
I'm not
in
doing
person.
any of these poses with you
Yeah.
guys.
Oh, you don't want to? Oh, you want to do a yoga pose?
No, we're not doing
Downward
yoga.
dog. Keith.
No.
Downward dog.
I'm almost 60. Just bending down's a hard thing.
Thank you for joining us on Real Talk, guys. It's truly a pleasure. We enjoy your support of the show. You guys have a good morning. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Dude, the round tables are excellent.
Yeah.